So, good evening. I am back. I just listened to a little pre-recorded clip because I went live just a few seconds ago, and actually the sound sounds fine. And whatever my Facebook notifications are saying about video settings, it sounded all right to me, and it looked all right to me. So, yeah, great. I was having a lovely chat to you, Emma, a couple of weeks ago about hormones, and I was thinking, how do I talk about hormones in relation to strength? And there's so many aspects of strength that we could talk about, being the pillar that we're looking at the moment. And my first thought was to start with minerals. When I look at the elements of food, I tend to think of foods elementally. So, fats I would associate with love. And many women at menopause need to eat more fats because it's part of the process that helps us make hormones, for instance. And if you're nowhere near menopause yet and your hormones are simply a bit imbalanced, chances are that you need more fats in your diet. And it's something that for a long time, we've tended to not have enough fats in our diet because we were taught that fats are bad. And we've all ended up eating too much sugar, which is such a problem for us. And so often what's needed, and I probably said this before, I certainly said it in a few other places, women are very good at denying themselves things. So often what's needed in order to create hormonal balance is to add stuff in. So adding fats into our diet, for instance, can help us make hormones themselves. And it fats are good, essential fatty acids, the right sort of fats are good for all sorts of systems in the body. In fact, every system in the body is aided by having good quality essential fatty acids or omegas in our lives. And there are certain sort of essential fatty acids that are not so good for us, and these tend to be what are called puffers and some of the omega 6s. So, and Emma will have talked about this, I'm sure, but getting rid of things like corn oil, soya oil, canola, these types of oils are not very good for us in terms of metabolizing food. We find it difficult to metabolize those sorts of oils. So we're looking to other types of omega oils, particularly omega 3s. We need lots of those. A little bit of sixes, but from good quality sevens and nines. So we can. I'm not going to talk too much about oils at this point today, but just I think of oils as being the love in our food, and that actually it's interesting that we're not very good at eating fats as women, and we're good at denying ourselves the love, the cuddle, the comfort in food from a fat source. And we tend to, because we're so driven by sugar, go to carbohydrates for what we call our comfort food, but in fact fats should have a far bigger profile. So carbohydrates we turn very quickly into sugar, and sugar is energy for us. So sugar's energy, fats are the love in the food, minerals are the strength in the food. Proteins to some extent are the strength in the food as well. And minerals are they're very grounding for us. And primary amongst the minerals is magnesium, and the Chinese call it the beautiful mineral. And if we have enough magnesium in our lives, then we draw up the other minerals that we need. So, for instance, if we're looking at strength, then the strength of our muscles is about the ability to relax the muscle, which magnesium aids, and contract the muscle, which calcium aids. So, if we had, for instance, cramps, and that could be headaches or that could be period pains, then we would be looking at having more magnesium in our life to relax that muscle, because it shows us the magnesium's a bit out of kilter and we're contracting the muscle too readily. And magnesium also helps soothe the nervous system and relax the nervous system. So this idea that when we've got magnesium in our life, we draw up calcium more efficiently. We also draw up potassium and phosphorus more efficiently. So it makes magnesium the number one mineral for us. And so you'll see that in the resources section, you've got a great document on magnesium. And what it's helping us do is draw up these other minerals. And minerals, very grounding, very much strength, very much what our teeth and our bones are made out of. And there's a fascinating conversation in the Chinese medicine system, which is a wonderful resource for some very simple concepts when it comes to things about our health. And I love to share some of these because I find that people sort of latch onto them very easily and say, "Oh, I must get my magnesium because it does this, that, and the other." And then when we look at the Chinese medicine system, the Chinese, as I said, called it the beautiful mineral because it's so important to us. But when we look at the Chinese medicine system and we look at teeth and bones, the quality of our teeth and bones relates to three organs which are very involved with our hormones, and that is the ovaries themselves, the adrenal glands, and the kidneys. So the adrenal glands look after stress response for us. Our flight, fight, fright, freeze response is governed by the adrenal glands and their capacity to pump out steroid hormones to help us to deal with the aggressor or the stressor. And those organs minerally can get depleted. They can get, if the energy around kidneys, adrenals, and ovaries is worn out from years of trying to be fertile, for instance, we need to nourish those organs. And when we nourish those organs, we increase the strength of bones and teeth because those organs, kidneys, adrenals, and ovaries, are related to the quality of bones and teeth strength. So, the ultimate goal for women, say postmenopausally, is to be looking after our bones so that we continue to have strong bones into old age. Key is magnesium because it's helping us store up calcium and phosphorus that bones are actually made out of. And then we need to manage stress in our lives in order not to push the adrenal glands too much. Because if the adrenal glands are overworked, that whole system gets depleted. So if we overwork either adrenals, ovaries, or kidneys, then we get depleted in terms of minerals and our ability to have strong teeth and bones. So stepping back a little bit of that from that, a lot about hormonal balance is learning to balance stress in our lives. So we might come back to other aspects of other pillars, but in order to be strong physically and to have robust ovaries and adrenal glands, excuse the siren going by, then I live in London. Then we need to look after ourselves in terms of stress as well. So a lot of helping women to balance their hormones is about creating time for ourselves. So the ultimate would be an Epsom salt bath, which is a great way of getting magnesium into your life. 20 minutes in the bath, downtime for yourself, perhaps with a nice candle lit, or as I always say, listening to my favorite astrologer, and giving yourself that me time, giving yourself that space to relax, unwind, and connect back to yourself. So that's kind of a physical way of looking at how to generate strength, make sure we have enough minerals, and number one would be the magnesium. Another way in which we can add in minerals quite easily and the body absorbs them very readily is what we call ionic minerals, and that's minerals in a particular form. And they're often what we call trace elements. So I work with an ionic element or ionic mineral combination, which is ocean trace minerals, humic and fulvic acid minerals. So we're looking to sources from the earth that are easy for us to absorb. And some of the nano minerals that are on the market, although they're very, very small, are not necessarily easy for us to absorb. So quality of what we take, to my mind, is really important as well. So ionic minerals can be a great way to take minerals into the body very easily and readily absorbed. We can look at the absorption in the gut from lots of other ways, but that's a nice place to start. So when we look at, and I've already kind of indicated this a little bit, but when we look at the need to relax, unwind, have space to us, immediately what comes up, I think, is sleep and how nourishing is our sleep. And certainly women in what I call true menopause, so the time when our periods are really, really changing, can suffer from a lack of sleep. And obviously, that can happen for other reasons in our life. And I wanted to talk a bit about sleep and strength this week because it is World Sleep Day on Friday, the 17th. It's also St. Patrick's Day. But apparently it's World Sleep Day on Friday the 17th of March. So I'm also going to a friend's wonderful singing performance. So time out is important, when it comes to being strong hormonally. But rest, how might we get rest if we are struggling, and we're not sleeping well through the night? So, an absolutely brilliant tip, if you can possibly do it, is to set your alarm for 3 o'clock in the afternoon and to literally lie down for 15 minutes at 3 o'clock. Even if it's in the middle of your working day, to take that 15 minutes out if you know you're not getting good rest at night and to just rest. Try not to do lots of screen time during that 15 minutes. So if you have to do screen time, make sure it's like that spacious time to message a good friend, or to send a little message to somebody that is going to cheer them up. So there's a feel good factor about that time that you're spending in the afternoon. And the reason I say 3 o'clock is because when we go back to the Chinese medicine system, this is the time of day when um, the, the bladder and the kidneys can get a little bit stressed if we've been pushing ourselves all day. So a little rest at 3 o'clock for 15 minutes is very, very restorative if you know that you're very tired or you haven't had enough sleep at night. Music can really help, as can things like yoga nidra. So adding in restful music, and piano music or Mozart are particularly good for certain parts of the brain. Piano music seems to be really popular at the moment, and I know that my restorative yoga teachers often play like really beautiful piano music. So I've compiled a little bit of Spotify playlist for myself with lots of nice piano music on, simply because I enjoy it, and I realize that when I'm working, if I've got that piano music going in the background, my day goes more smoothly. It's more restful. So resting and making sure that our rest is nourishing can really help with strength. So that rest in the day could be helpful. But if you find that you're wakeful at night, then have a look at Yoga Nidra. And I'm sure you can download Yoga Nidra, or you can get Yoga Nidra on like a meditation app. And it's a really beautiful, gentle, talked through body relaxation. It's a particular type of relaxation. And it can just be fantastic to have that 20 minutes to help you get back to sleep if you know that you're waking at a certain time. And after the live, I'll share some music by somebody called Max Richter, who wrote a piece of music specifically to help people get to sleep. And my favorite line about that is that while I was writing a blog on sleep, I was playing that piece of music and writing at the same time. And I was staying at a friend's house at the time, and she has two cats. And one of the cats, he would every so often she'd climb up to see what I was doing generally. And when I was playing this music, she climbed up onto the table and literally fell asleep in front of my laptop. So between me and the keyboard and the laptop. And I thought, wow, this music's really powerful. So I'll share the link to that. So it could be that you use something like a yoga nidra, which is a guided meditation, particular type of guided meditation, or you use some music to help you fall into a deeper sleep. And in terms of a couple of things that can help us sleep that we might be unaware of, is we all know that caffeine wakes us up. So I would say if you're somebody who suffers from sleep deprivation, to make sure that you have your last coffee of the day by 12 o'clock. So 12 p.m., not 12 a.m. Don't have that coffee after dinner in the evening, and try not to have a mid-afternoon coffee. So what caffeine does is it interrupts our natural production of melatonin. And melatonin is a hormone that builds in the body throughout the course of the day, so that by bedtime we should feel sleepy because the melatonin is built up in our body. But the one thing that disrupts it massively is caffeine. So if we keep having caffeine throughout the day and we're still drinking caffeine at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, chances are that is interfering with our natural cycle of creating melatonin to get to sleep. And, I mentioned the yoga nidra and relaxing music earlier, and particularly certain types of music that will relax the parts of the brain, particularly the pineal gland, or begin to relax parts of the brain that influence the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is what releases the melatonin. So another little tip that you can do to help you release melatonin is to have a small glass of sour cherry juice before bedtime. And there's a couple of different manufacturers of that. So try not to go for a sweet and sour cherry juice. There are a couple of major brands around, and you want to go for a concentrate that is not got anything added to it. So readily available all over the world. Sour cherry juice, rather, cherry juice in general is very antioxidant, and it's a fantastic juice for immunity. It'd be great at this time of year as we begin to go into the hay fever season. So it's lovely and antioxidant rich. But what you want to encourage the melatonin production is sour cherry juice. That's slightly different, and is one of the few things that will stimulate the gut to produce the right sort of bacteria that is the precursor to us making melatonin. Now, that melatonin is made in the pineal gland. The pineal gland is the sixth, we might call it the sixth chakra. It's the third eye, and it sits just in the forehead here. And in fact, the practice of meditation and listening to the right kind of music will help the body release that melatonin as well. So when we're looking at rest, mid-afternoon rest, and some little tips to help us sleep more deeply, not drink coffee too late, encourage our body to produce melatonin, maybe have a little sour cherry juice at bedtime. And then if you are somebody who suffers from things like hot flushes at night, try to have a cooling shower before getting into bed. Some people, their sleep's enhanced by having a weighted blanket. So there's lots of little tips around sleep and what we're beginning to call sleep hygiene, which I always think is a hilarious phrase. Good sleep practice, encouraging good sleep practice. And then I was thinking also, if we want to be strong, what about talking about the people that are in our lives? So we often talk about building each other up, encouraging each other, so at, particularly at times of transition in our lives. So for women, that is puberty, when our periods start, pregnancy, perhaps when we are going through a huge hormonal transition, and of course menopause. So even if we don't have children, we are all going to go through puberty and menopause. So even a woman who suffers premature ovarian insufficiency, where the ovaries don't have enough reserves to keep fertile for a long period of time, or maybe even truly gain fertility, she's still going to go through menopause, the point at which that certain hormones drop off. And so one of the things that I often find is that it's really important to ask ourselves if the people in our lives are actually helping us to build our strength, to nourish us, to nurture us, to encourage us into fullness, if you like. And so a little tip that I often share is, I had a couple of friends, I'm post-menopause myself, but I had a couple of friends around the time when I was going through a lot of what felt like big change in my life. And those two friends I found quite draining, because they always wanted my advice, or they always wanted really for me to be a sounding board, just to hear what it was that they had got to say. And I found that that was very draining for me. But I knew that also that I didn't want to lose those friendships. So I had to like reposition myself on those friendships. And what I decided to do was to make sure that whenever we met, we did something together, that we had some kind of experience together rather than that I found myself, at the meal table just hearing their woes, which is definitely not the best way to digest food. So rather, I thought about our common interests and said, let's go to a gallery or let's go to visit another town together. Let's do something active together that we experience together and we can share rather than, I didn't actually say it to them, but rather than me just be a sounding board for everything, because I'm a therapist, so that's very easy for that to happen. So if that sounds relevant to you, boundaries isn't I don't want you ever in my life, but how can we be in each other's lives for the best benefit for each other? So hopefully that's a little bit of help for somebody who's listening. And then also, I just wanted to talk a little bit about um, the roles of the different hormones, and particularly I guess, the main thing about estrogen is that it brings us to fertility. If we're pregnant, it's what brings us to labor, so we have progesterone's rich throughout pregnancy, but as we are ready to give birth, the estrogen kicks in and starts, it initiates processes for us. And in that sense, it can be very powerful for us. It's also it's very much about our fertility, so it brings us to fertility. And in that sense, in order to um, be fertile, we're thinking about how to be fertilized as well. So I think, too much estrogen can lead to too much competitiveness between women. And what often's needed between women, if there is conflict, is actually more progesterone. Progesterone is what I call the feel-good hormone. It's it's what makes us look good in pregnancy, so the hair shines, the skin's better. It helps tone the muscle of the uterus because the uterus is a muscle and it's holding baby and it's growing and expanding, if you like, for the first time in our lives. So progesterone has an amazing action on the muscles of the body. And in that sense, I see progesterone as actually being part of our strengthening, and that often a lot of the problems around not feeling strong for a woman are also related to not having enough progesterone. And there's a lot of conversation at the moment about women and testosterone. And yes, we do need some testosterone. And in fact, gram per gram, we need more actual testosterone than we need estrogen. But that doesn't mean to say that we need a ton of testosterone. It's just in terms of the role that it does, we need it in our system. And testosterone is much more about our drive and our physical strength. So, testosterone has a role to play if a woman is experiencing muscle weakness or a lack of drive and enthusiasm, and also a loss of libido. So, testosterone absolutely has a place, but we need to be very careful about getting it from a synthetic source. And I prefer personally to try to get testosterone, if it's needed, from a herbal or plant source, or perhaps from an animal related source. So I'm thinking of things like bone broth here, where we are encouraging the body to have the right matrix, the right balance of foods in order to make the hormones that we need. So I'm a natural health practitioner. I'm a homeopath, I'm a flower essence prescriber and a holistic health coach. So my approach is not to add in lots of synthetic hormones as my first port of call. I absolutely accept that if we've done everything we possibly can naturally and we don't get the results that we need, then we might need to tweak with a small amount of synthetic hormones, or we might need to tweak with a small amount of something like wild yam cream. But again, I'm very careful about the suppliers for that. So testosterone is something that, given the right balance, we should be able to make it ourselves. But the indicators for us needing it might be things like not being physically strong, loss of libido, and really a loss of drive. So, is there anything else I was going to say about strength and that kind of nourishment? And I guess it is about balance. One of the biggest things about the hormonal conversation is understanding that certain foods, certain supplements, certain herbs can be what we call adaptogens. And an adaptogen will help bring an organ into balance. And so there are herbs which are purely stimulatory, and there are herbs which help block an action, so they can help dampen down the action of something which is detrimental to us. But some of the most valuable herbs to use when we want balance are the adaptogenic ones, and to trust the process that they will help the system come into equilibrium. So I guess the last thing I'm going to talk about is protein, because protein is also about strength, the tissue that we're built of. And the organ that's responsible for protein assimilation is the thyroid. And the thyroid is often an organ which is under functioning for women. And when we're just, this is new news for us, really, that part of depletion in thyroid energy can be through the use of synthetic hormones. And by that, I mean the birth control pill and the morning after pill. So, for many women who suffer low thyroid, the roots of that are right back in using synthetic hormones like the morning after pill or the birth control pill. And I believe that is highly likely to be the case for me when I had low thyroid through menopause. The great news for me, and hopefully for somebody listening, is that you can naturally reboot the thyroid and rebuild the thyroid. It is possible. I have done it, and I'm very happy that I've done it, because I didn't really want to take thyroxine for my underfunctioning thyroid, because ultimately there are side effects of all medication, and they're fine as a little prop for a period of time. But I certainly didn't want to get into using thyroxine and be on that kind of for the rest of my life. So yeah, the assimilation of protein is in the role of the thyroid. So if the thyroid's not functioning well, then we might need to look at its at supporting the thyroid in order to assimilate protein well. And a couple of tips about protein assimilation. One, and it sounds so rudimentary, but chewing our food efficiently will help us produce what we call digestive enzymes, and the digestive enzyme that mainly helps us with digesting protein is called protease. So if we chew our food efficiently, we should produce enough protease. If we come to our food comfortably and in a measured way, and we don't rush through eating it, then we should digest it more efficiently. So, giving ourselves time to sit and chew and eat and enjoy our food is really important when it comes to the metabolization of certain things. And proteins can be harder for us to digest than some of the other foodstuffs. I suppose the other difficult to digest foodstuffs are things like mushrooms and certain fibrous vegetables. So again, we need to chew and give ourselves time to digest those. But if we still find that difficult, we can add in certain foods which are rich in digestive enzymes. They could help us digest our food more efficiently. So traditionally, we might eat certain foods as an aperitif, or that's the Italian word, like antipasti, so before the pasta, before digesting those carbs, we eat antipasti. Anti means before. So those before pastas, before the paste, before the carbohydrate, that's literally what it means. We eat certain foods like artichoke, perhaps asparagus, radish, often a certain vegetable that's a little bitter, so like the bitter leaves, the salad leaves, the dark salad leaves or radicchio, those will help us produce the right digestive enzymes to process the heavier foods, the pasta, the meat. So the pasta comes first, and then secondi, the meat course, the fish course, the heavier duty food to process comes next. And so we really should be using foods to help us digest the harder to digest foods, so we can do this with supplements. Of course, we could take a prebiotic or a digestive enzyme, but it's lovely to learn the foods that can really help us digest. And in technically something like an Aperol spritz, or there's an artichoke spirit called chinar. Those are developed to help us digest the food, so we have those before we eat the heavier foods. Same with the sherry. The whole point of those is as a small digestif, so I'm not encouraging you to go out and drink yourself silly, but to understand why those foods are in the production line, if you like, rather than just drunk or eaten randomly. There's a function to those being there. And so, if we are to digest protein efficiently to keep us strong, then there's some little tips, digestive enzymes, prebiotics, or foods which have those characters that help to set us up to digest protein more efficiently. And then when we are eating the protein, again, coming back to my Chinese medicine book, it's a wonderful book called Healing with Whole Foods by Paul Pitchford. And he says the worst culprits for not digesting protein efficiently are vegans who eat too fast. When I read that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. So vegans need to be careful about where they're getting their protein from. And if you are vegetarian or vegan, especially if you're not eating, fish, pescatarian, so you're really truly vegetarian, or even more so vegan, then you may be conscious of this already, but if you're not, it's really important to make sure that you do food combining so that in a given meal you eat a complete protein. And when you eat a complete protein, the body is satisfied and it's not hunting for more food. So a lot of the meals that have been put together in the True You Hub are put together in a way that means that your body is not hunting for those other food types, because it's had a complete and balanced meal, but particularly this complete protein. So when we put together, for instance, lentils and rice, or beans and a grain, we are creating a whole protein. And that's a really fundamental thing for vegans in particular, but to some extent for vegetarians, particularly if you're restricting some of your cheese and eggs while you're doing some of the diets here. And it may be that you suddenly see the role of the fats, and how those can help create balance. Just brings back full circle to some of the things we were talking about earlier. So I'm going to finish there. Let's just have a little recap. So magnesium we talked about ionic minerals and the need to help us draw up. Magnesium helps us draw up the other minerals to create a strong matrix, to look after ourselves in terms of stress, so that organs like kidneys, adrenals, and ovaries are restored when we've been through a period of stress, and we create balance in those organs, rather than stress the bones and the teeth and lose the quality of bones and teeth through stress is a common path, and you can see that in studies. To make sure that you have adequate rest. So if you're not getting rest at night, some little tips that I've talked through to help you get more rest, lead a more restful life. And to be conscious of the people in your life that take away your energy, that take away your strength, and to look for new strategies to help create balance and still have them in your life if they're meant to be there. And then also we talked a little bit about actual hormones and their role. So if you've got questions, pop them in the chat box below and tag me. My name's Caroline Gaskin. I'm sure yeah, I'm live, so it says my name up there. Yeah, tag me if I don't answer, because you know what Facebook's like with algorithms. Sometimes you do a post and it only gets to a few people. So if I don't answer, just shout a little bit louder and I'll come back and help you find the resources that you need. So I hope that's helpful. Have a great evening if you're watching. And if you're watching on catch up, just write hashtag replay because we'll all see that and then we can answer any questions as well. So yeah, great. See you next time in a few weeks. I think I'm back a little bit later. I think it's in May. So yeah, bye for now.